Hi everyone, welcome to today's session on LawSikho, and we have today our guest. But before I introduce him, let me introduce myself. I'm Ramanuj, and you are all very welcome. Okay, so this is an interactive session, and I'll request you to keep asking me questions as we move forward, right? So let's welcome our guest today. We have Robert H. Ahdieh today, and Robert is a professor and is a dean of the law school at the Texas A&M University. Okay, so let's all welcome Robert. Robert, you are live.
Good to be with you all. Thank you for having me.
Yes. Robert, why don't you just tell us a little bit about what you do and your career so far, so that our audience has an idea about who you are.
Wonderful. I'm glad to do so. And again, thank you all for participating, and thank you to LawSikho for hosting today. So my name is Bobby Ahdieh. I'm the dean, as was mentioned, of Texas A&M University's law school, which is in Dallas, Fort Worth, in Texas, in the middle of the United States. I am originally from New York City. Went to college at Princeton University, and then to Yale University for law school. I actually have some connection to India going back many years. My grandparents lived in Pune for probably 10, 15 years when I was young, and so visited India from the time I was very young on many occasions, and have always enjoyed so much being there. And I'm looking forward to actually coming to India in a few days for about a week and a half. I will be back, and I'm excited about that. My area of research and work has been business law, basically. So corporate law, financial regulation, securities law, and a little bit of administrative law. I was a professor for many years at Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia. Although I spent some time visiting at some other schools, at Georgetown Law School and at Columbia Law School. And then about a year and a half ago, I was invited to become the dean of Texas A&M University's law school. Again, that's where I am. And I'll say more about the law school later, but the quick summary is that we are the fastest rising law school in the United States in terms of rank and reputation. And so I was excited to be here and to come be a part of that exciting effort.
Right. Yeah. So I'm going to ask you more about the university soon, but why don't you tell us a little about your personal journey, and like, I believe you, for a brief while, you practiced as a lawyer as well, right?
I did. Yes, I left that out. So after I finished law school, I, excuse me, I knew that I wanted to become a professor, and I wanted to teach, given how much I enjoyed teaching and I enjoyed working with students. But I decided I would practice for a time. And so I did what was called clerking first. So many students in the United States will make the decision after law school to go and work for a judge for 1 or 2 years. They go and they help the judge with doing research and doing writing and drafting their opinions and deciding their cases. So I did that for 1 year in San Francisco. And then after that, I was a litigator. I was a trial attorney for the United States government, for the U.S. Department of Justice in Washington, D.C. And there I did civil litigation and defense litigation. So when someone would sue the United States government to say that something was unconstitutional or a government agency had engaged in some inappropriate behavior, my job was to defend the United States in those situations. And I loved it. I love being in the courtroom, and I had a great time doing that.
Great. And what made you want to shift from that to from practicing law to being an academic?
A professor. So I had done some teaching dating back to my college days. When I was in college, I did some teaching. And I did continued in law school doing some teaching. So I really enjoyed that part of it. I also enjoyed the research and writing part of it, writing papers, and publishing those. And so I enjoyed both of those pieces. But as I mentioned, I really enjoyed. Some people leave legal practice because they don't like it. That wasn't me. I loved it. I loved every day of it. I enjoyed doing it. I enjoyed, again, as I said, being in the courtroom and being in front of a jury. But ultimately, my feeling was that I would be able to have more of an impact as a professor than I could as a lawyer. As a lawyer, I would have individual cases in which I would do a good job and I would work hard. and I would have an impact. But as a law professor, I was educating the next generation of lawyers. And in that way, the impact that I could have would be greater. And so that's what ultimately led me to the decision to teach.
Teach. How is the life of an academic, and what does your job involve? I'm sure apart from teaching, you must be doing many other things apart from teaching. So what all, if somebody is a very successful academic, what they would be doing in their day?
Well, I should distinguish between, now that I'm a dean, most of my life is going to meetings. So for those who like the teaching and research part of the professor's job, becoming a dean is a bad idea because you can't do as much as you want of either of those things. But as a professor, so obviously teaching is one piece of it, and you teach, everything from first year courses, which tend to be bigger and are more foundational. Students are just starting law school and they're just trying to get a sense of, the law generally and trying to learn this skill we talk about of thinking like a lawyer. So in that area, in terms of first year courses, I taught 2 courses. I taught contracts, and then I also taught a course called Legislation and Regulation. That was kind of an introduction to statutory interpretation and an introduction to the administrative state, regulation, basically. So those are my first year courses. My upper level courses were again in the business law area, but lots of international. So international trade I taught comparative law, I taught international financial regulation, also taught domestic business law and business associations and financial regulation. So that was my teaching. And again, I enjoyed it very much. First year students are very different from students later in their careers. First year students I enjoyed because they were so excited and they were excited to be there. And part of my job was to build on that excitement. And then later, of course, students have more sense of their interest. And there, my job was to give them the foundation they needed to be able to graduate and succeed in practice. And the other part of the job, of course, is research and writing. So I wrote a book. Actually, while I was in law school, I wrote a book about Russian law. This was when I was in law school, was right when the Soviet Union was collapsing, had ceased to exist. And so I wrote a book about the legal transition process from the Soviet Union to Russia, and particularly the constitutional changes. So that was the first thing I wrote. And then when I started teaching, I wrote a series of articles published in different journals on things related to financial regulation and comparative law and international law and international trade. And again, there too, I think of it as the impact you can have on the world is quite significant through the writing you do. Why? Because when you write something, it goes into print and it's out there forever. So long after I'm gone, the written work that I've produced will be out there in the world, and folks will be able to find it and read it and learn from it, I hope. And so that's that part of the job that a professor does as well.
Great. So I wanted to ask you more about the law school, about the Texas A&M University, and it's a very old university to start with, right? Can you tell us a bit about the background of the university and how is it like? Yeah.
Sure. So Texas A&M University was the first public university in the state of Texas. So there's also the University of Texas. But Texas A&M is actually older, was established before the University of Texas. So we were the first big public university here in Texas. Texas, we can talk more about Texas as well, probably is useful. But just the quick thing I'll say is that Texas is one of the second largest state in the United States, and the fastest growing. So you can think of it as India as the fastest growing economy in the world. Texas is the fastest growing economy in the United States. And so we really bring in from all over the world and all over the country. The university brings in incredibly bright, strong, capable students and professors, I should say, to engage cutting edge issues around not just law, but engineering and computer science and agriculture and any number of other fields as well. So the university is now actually the largest university in the United States. Texas A&M is. We have altogether 125,000 students, so it's quite big. Some of the other relevant numbers, we have the second largest number of students who do study abroad programs. So it's a very international university in terms of its connections. In India, but not only in India, in China, in Europe, and all over the world. And the university really is very much focused on trying to identify what is the knowledge, what are the skills that students need for the 21st century. So rather than thinking about what was taught when I was in school, we are trying to think about what will the work of a lawyer, of an engineer, of any other student look like in 5 years and 10 years and 20 years. And that's the education that we want to provide. And that's really why the university is growing so quickly, is because there are lots of students both in the United States and elsewhere that's what they're looking for. They want that kind of excellent and applied education. Another number about the university, and all of these are about the university. We can also, of course, talk about the law school in particular, but another statistic is we have one of the highest average salaries of new graduates of any university in the US. And that's in part because, again, the goal of the university is to provide an excellent, foundational education, but also to allow them to be set up for their professional success.
All right, that's really exciting, and sounds like the Texas A&M University is doing some amazing work. But tell us more about the law school. How about the law school, and where does it stand in the US?
Good. So the Texas A&M Law School has been around for 30 years now, but it was only 6 years ago that Texas A&M became part of Texas A&M. So Texas A&M University had wanted a law school for many years. And finally, after some earlier efforts, 6 years ago, they acquired Texas A&M, acquired this law school. The university's perspective was that they did not want a law school. They wanted a great law school. And so they looked at what are the things that will enable us to create a great law school. And really, there are three things that the university invested in. Number one, bringing in strong faculty. So the law school has hired, since it became part of A&M, has hired 30 faculty. So in a 6-year period, has hired 30 faculty. There is no law school in the history of the United States that has hired that many faculty in such a short time. The notion was, in essence, that we want to bring in world-class professors, and I should say world-class really in the sense of from all over the world. So we have an incredibly international faculty as well, including a number of faculty from India, faculty from China, faculty from Indonesia, faculty from Mexico, faculty from Europe, elsewhere around the world. So we wanted to create a faculty that would ensure that our students were receiving a global education, given that the practice of law today has become so global, right? Today, legal practice is international and is transnational in a way that it wasn't even when I came out of law school. So today, you really have to have that global engagement. So we grew the faculty significantly, was the first thing we did. Second thing we did was we invested significantly in bringing in excellent students. So the law school, A&M Law School is number one in the United States in terms of I told you already, is number one in the country in terms of the increase in rank. We have gone up about 100 points in the US News rankings in the last 5-6 years. No law school has even come close to that during that time frame. We're also number one in the country in terms of the increase in the quality of students. So if we look at the LSAT scores of our incoming students and look at the undergrad GPAs of our students, we have seen tremendous progress over the last 5-6 years. Again, number one in the country in terms of how much the quality of students has gone up. So we invested heavily in bringing in great students, and we continue to do that. And one of our goals in India is to find excellent students for our JD program, but also for our LLM program and other programs, and to bring them here to the school. And the third thing was the university invested in, and we can talk more about this later on, but they invested in a set of significant, what I will call pillars of strength So the idea was, let's figure out what are the areas where there is value for students in developing expertise, and then let's invest in faculty hiring and developing programs in those areas. So one of those areas is in intellectual property and technology and innovation. So the law school is ranked number eight in the country. So out of about 200 law schools in the US, our intellectual property program is number 8. That's in large part because we have 7 faculty who work in that area. The only 2 law schools that have similar numbers in terms of faculty are the University of Michigan and Stanford. No other law school has as many IP faculty as we have, and again, a very international group, as I mentioned already. So intellectual property, technology, innovation is one area in which A&M Law School is probably as strong as almost any law school in the United States, and stronger, of course, than almost all of them. Right. The second one was arbitration, as well as mediation and negotiation. So obviously, litigation is important. That said, the future of the world is much more in arbitration and mediation and negotiation than it is in litigation. So there, we are ranked in the top 15 in the United States. So again, out of 200 law schools, we're in the top 15, and that includes both international arbitration as well as domestic. So that's the second area. Energy and environment is a third area where we have a very strong faculty, 5, 6, 7 faculty who work in that area and do work ranging from water law to energy law, oil and gas law, so on and so forth. So those are 3 areas where we are already very strong and that the university has grown. And again, now or later, I'm glad to share there are additional areas that we are building expertise in over the next few years.
Okay, so I was just checking a quick, what's happening in the India-Texas trade, and sure. I was excited to see that Indian companies have been investing in Texas.
Absolutely.
Some of our oil and gas companies, ONGC, the government company, has been buying fracking companies. Infosys has set up a campus there in the US. Similarly, there are Texas companies like Lockheed Martin and even others who have opened major facilities in India. So it seems there's a major trade happening between India
and
Texas. And it seems that apart from California, Texas is the second biggest investment, and Texas is the biggest destination for Indian investment in the US, and also the second biggest trade partner. And US, I believe Texas has the highest export of all countries, of all the states in the US. And also
So I was going to say, yes. So, that's right. It's, 20% of U.S. foreign direct investment into India comes from Texas. 10% of U.S.-India trade is between Texas and that's not surprising, again, as I mentioned, given India, how fast India being the fastest growing economy in the world, and Texas being the fastest growing economy in the U.S., and Texas also being a big economy. So Texas is the 10th largest. If Texas was its own country, it would be the 10th largest economy in the United States. We have 4 of the 10 largest cities in the U.S. Of the 10 largest cities, 4 of them are in Texas. So Dallas, Fort Worth, where we are, Houston, Austin, and San Antonio are 4 of the 10 biggest cities. Dallas, Fort Worth, where we are, has 21 Fortune 500 companies. Among 50, there's 50 in Texas. 21 of them are in Dallas, Fort Worth. We also have the fourth busiest airport in the world, Dallas Fort Worth Airport, DFW Airport, where we have also the world's biggest airline. American Airlines is the biggest airline in the world. Part of that is also our location. So we're centrally located, and that obviously that enables us to do lots of that. And in India in particular, there's lots of that. So Wipro has its U.S. headquarters here. Mahindra has its U.S. headquarters here. Larsen and Toubro, Reliance, Infosys, as you mentioned, all of these have their U.S. headquarters here in Texas. And as a result, there's a huge amount of opportunity in terms of the broadly Texas's big economy has an impact. But then in terms of India in particular, again, I mentioned earlier the 20% of foreign direct investment from the U.S. into India comes from Texas. 10% of trade between U.S. and India is Texas specific, and then Indian companies, including Wipro, Mahindra, Larsen and Toubro, Reliance, Infosys, all have their U.S. headquarters here in Texas. And it cuts across lots of industries too. So oil and gas, you mentioned, but also chemicals more broadly, pharmaceuticals. There's a lot of healthcare increasingly in India. So lots of areas in which.
It seems that shipping is also a major industry in Houston.
Absolutely.
A major,
Exactly.
world's
Yes.
largest port apparently in cargo.
That's exactly right. So again, so lots of shipping in the state, and again, increasing lots of that, particularly in the energy, liquefied natural gas trade between India and the U.S. is quite significant as well. So there's really lots of there. You know, when I think about it in general, there's lots of opportunity in Texas. But really, the juxtaposition for those students as well as lawyers and professionals who really have a foot in both of those worlds, a connection to Texas, a connection to India. There is already a huge amount of opportunity, and my expectation is that opportunity will really only grow over time.
So in our experience, Indian lawyers mostly look at if they think of either studying or working in the US, they look at California and New York as the traditional two destinations. But how does Texas compare in light of all the information that you shared?
Sure. So again, what I would tell you is Texas is the fastest growing state in the United States, in no small part because of all the people that are moving from New York and California to Texas. Cost of living is lower in Texas, number one, but also I've mentioned the Indian companies, but I can also talk about all the four other, Toyota has its U.S. headquarters in Dallas-Fort Worth, for example. I told you 50 Fortune 500 companies, a lot of which have come in just the last few years. They have come to Texas. So the professional opportunities in Texas, in reality, they include, I should mention high tech. We haven't talked about high tech. There's lots of high tech here as well.
Texas Instruments in India has a lot of investments in India, and it's a large employer in India as well.
That's right. Yep, good, exactly. So Texas Instruments, but also others. The Uber has just opened a big office here in Dallas-Fort Worth. The Facebook and others do lots of work here. So so what I would say is, in terms of professional opportunities within the United States, the data is all very clear that there is an incredible pull in the direction of Texas. Some of that is location, some of that is cost of living, some of that is low regulation. So the amount of economic growth and opportunity that comes with that in Texas is huge. Big law firms are opening up offices. In Texas, every day a new one is coming in from New York or California or Chicago or other places. So the first thing I would say is that Texas is attractive in the sense of the professional opportunities that are here. That's number one. Two, I would say the central location is something to consider because we're located right in the middle of the country. The ease of getting from Texas to Chicago, to New York, to California, to Florida, to any place else in the country is very high. So that's also another sort of attractive thing about Texas, I would say. Yeah, and then again, broadly, I would tell you that there are opportunities in terms of education that you don't find elsewhere. So for a student, for example, who is interested in intellectual property, it's the case that there will be opportunities vis-a-vis Texas A&M that they're not going to find at some random other law school in New York or in California or the like. Likewise, in terms of energy, students interested in energy and the like, students interested in arbitration, students interested in cybersecurity and privacy is another area in which we are building. So those are a few of the reasons why, again, I would think. Oh, let me say one other piece. Relative to at least some other places, it's also part of the reason there's a big Indian American community. It's about, I think it's just students. Indian students in Texas, I think it's something like 30 or 40,000 Indian national students are in Texas studying as of now. I think some of that is also, again, all the things I've said. I will say also because we are in the southern part of the United States, weather is generally better than lots of the other parts of the country also. So that's one other thing to mention.
Okay. If you can throw some light on, what kind of work, if let's say there's an Indian lawyer, and okay, I'm going to ask you soon about the bar exam and how Indian lawyers can qualify in Texas to practice there. But before that, I just wanted to understand, like, we understood how the industry is, and there's a lot of trade and there's a lot of investment happening from India to Texas and Texas to India, and there's a lot of opportunity in Texas. But given that, what do you think that an Indian lawyer might be like more suited for? Of course, they could do any kind of work, but what would be something where an Indian lawyer would have a special advantage when they practice in Texas?
Great. So again, the first thing I'd say is, again, it's a little bit of, it should be grounded in the student's interests, of course. So if you're doing what you love and what you're excited to be doing and what you have a background in, you're going to be more successful. There will be more opportunities, more demand, these kinds of things. So for example, if a student has a technical background, has an engineering background or something like this, or even some other science background, then intellectual property becomes cybersecurity becomes a more attractive, because then they're able to bring that background to bear in terms of what they're doing. So that's one thing I would say. And I would say in that area, there is tremendous, back to the Texas growth, there is a huge amount of opportunity there, right? So intellectual property, not only is Texas A&M Law School very strong in, there is just lots of that kind of work in Texas at this time. Beyond IP, I would say almost any other area that involve health law, cybersecurity, privacy issues, any of these areas that have a science or technical element to them, there's going to be that much more opportunity to be found in general, but also here in Texas. I would also say that, again, with the growth in globalization of law, international trade and finance, right, is going to be hugely vital. And we are seeing more and more of that work being done in Texas. Houston has a lot of that work already. Dallas-Fort Worth is growing in terms of that kind of work. Some of that actually is even close to home. It's that we have the longest single state barrier with foreign country, right? So because of the long border with Mexico that Texas has, we have the longest sort of land border of any state in the U.S. with a foreign country. So some of that is as close to home. But as we talked about with the numbers in terms of India trade, a lot of it is further afield as well, right? So I would say international trade, international finance is probably another area. Then, of course, when disputes arise, international arbitration is a vital area. Again, an area of work that Texas is growing in terms of the activity. And it's, again, not surprising given the number of Indian companies, Chinese companies, German companies that have their offices and headquarters and manufacturing here in Texas, and vice versa. Of course, international commercial arbitration becomes a hugely important area.
Okay, I'll just share some of the areas where I have been seeing opportunities. So specifically,
sure, yeah, please.
Recently there are companies from India which have gone and set up in the US. So of course there are sometimes
Oh, yes.
it becomes easier for an Indian company to talk to somebody who knows the Texas law
Sure.
as well as Indian law, because there's some common theme. Similarly, when a Texas company invests in India and they want to know that what could be like a certain litigation look like, or certain advice they might need about how Indian law functions, and given that if Indian lawyer who's in Texas and has Indian experience would be preferred, and advice could be very valuable. So, and
can I say, maybe I was focusing on a different question in some sense, but to what you're describing, I will say what has happened over the last 5-10 years is previously I'm going to use India, but I could do the same thing with China or some other country. The Indian company was generally looking for a U.S.-born attorney to help them, right? And the idea was that, well, we're engaged with the U.S., so we want a U.S. But today, increasingly, both the Indian company and the U.S. company are looking for someone who is not U.S.-born, is India-born, but has that U.S. exposure, right? So the opportunity,
well qualified, maybe, yeah.
Yeah, of course, well qualified. But the idea is that they have the foundational understanding, cultural as well as legal, in the foreign jurisdiction in India in this case. But they also have training that is local and is a connection. And so for the Indian company, as you say, it's easier to talk to, engage them, right, and relate. But even for the U.S. company, increasingly they recognize that if they want to meaningfully engage India, they will be able to do so more effectively with a Indian-born lawyer than with the U.S.-born lawyer, even if the U.S.-born lawyer has spent lots of time in India or has been exposed to it.
Agreed. Yeah. So I think there's a great opportunity there. So if you can tell us, like, I believe a few years back, the Texas, basically it was made rules were created by the Texas Bar Association for the foreign lawyers to practice there, and rules were created. So if you can
That's right.
throw some light on that.
That's right. So basically, obviously we have a growing number of international students who are JD students who are getting their JD from us. So obviously those students are able to practice as any JD. There's no special rules for them. They're a JD graduate and so on and so forth. But the rule changes a few years ago allow students who earn their Master of Laws, who earn their LLM, to be able to sit for the bar, and assuming passage of the bar, then to be able to practice. So there basically is there's a set of course requirements, which for if any students are interested and reach out to us, we can send you the particulars of them. But they're basically a set of requirements that will facilitate a student having the foundational knowledge of U.S. law to be able to effectively sit for and pass the bar exam. So it's some basic courses in constitutional law, in civil procedure, so on and so forth, that they take. You can think of it a little bit as it is a version of the first year curriculum of the JD program. So the idea is that you are getting that foundation, and once you have that foundation, then you are in a position to be able to sit for the bar and then practice. And let me be clear, have fully practice. So we don't. Some states distinguish in Texas for the students who sit for the bar, whether an LLM or JD, if they pass the bar, they then have the full rights of practice after that to be able to do so. It's worth noting, though, that you shouldn't think of it as we have students who graduate from the Texas A&M Law School who then go sit for the bar in another state and practice in other states as well. So one is not limited to practicing or sitting for the Texas bar. One can also sit someplace else, but for those students who choose to do so and want to do so in Texas, they can. It's in fact actually become even easier over the last few years to be able to practice elsewhere, because more and more states are using what is called, in the United States, are using what's called the Uniform Bar Exam. And so it's the same bar exam being used in now 30-some states around the country, including Texas. And so if you take that exam, you simply have to waive into another state. So if you pass the exam in Texas, then you can simply go and practice in another state, assuming your score was high enough to be accepted in that other state as well. So in that sense, today versus when I was in law school, the opportunities for a student to go to school in Texas, but then practice in New York or California or Chicago or Atlanta or someplace else is much higher than it used to be.
If you can tell us, how, we have heard that the Texas bar exam is quite difficult and the pass rate is around 40%, I believe. So yeah. if you can tell us, how does it compare with other exams? Although I keep saying that Indians are really good at giving exams.
Good.
And they have given their board exams, and
you have much more practice than most Americans.
Yes.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So so that's the first thing to say is that it is not the case that everyone's chance of passing is 40%, right? It's the case that 40% are passing, right? So what do I mean by that? Remember that language is one big barrier, right? So independent of what you're pointing out about Indians being well-versed in taking exams, an Indian student who sits for the bar exam doesn't have nearly the same language barrier as a student from Korea or a student from some other country, right? From France, for that matter, right? So recognize that already that makes the 40% figure not particularly telling, number one. Number two, I don't think of Texas as among the harder bar exams. So usually people talk about California is very difficult. They talk about New York is very difficult. A few others. I don't think Texas is necessarily on that list of very hard bar exams. But that said, it is something for which it is important to be systematic and focused, right? So for those students who, again, especially an Indian student who doesn't have the language barrier issue, taking the Texas bar exam, which is relatively more manageable than the California and New York bar exams, and who is systematic about their study and practice and uses a bar prep course that is good and strong and reliable and and the like, my guess is that sort of, I know it will be higher, the chances are better than 40%, but my guess would be that sort of they have reasonably good prospects if they do those things, right? If those things are true. But you have to do those things, right? You have to have gone through those, you have to do the work in some sense to get there.
Okay, if you can tell us a little bit about what kind of, we have got a few questions also about this, like what is the teaching style like? What is the, like how long is the program? Like I believe it's about 9 or 10 months. And
Right.
if you can throw some light on that, like, what is the program like and what should people expect? And in India, it's very different. I'm sure you have a bit of an idea about how Indian law schools are, given that Srividya must have told you at least. So,
Exactly.
so I know that it's very different in the US. So if you can throw some light on that,
Sure.
like
Sure.
what is an LLM program? What should people aim to get from an LLM program, and what should they expect in terms of academics?
Good. So the let me talk about sort of the broad structure. So our LLM program is a year. I mean, it is a year, but an academic year. So it starts in August, and you graduate. You finish in May. So it's an academic year. So the credits can be met. It's 24 credits for us. And so a student can complete it with 12 credits in the fall and 12 credits in the spring semester. There is some introductory coursework you do that's kind of foundational. And then it's up to you. Now, again, if someone wants to sit for the bar exam, there's a set of courses that they need to do given the bar exam. If someone does not plan to sit for the bar exam, then they have the full range of courses. So we open up the entire curriculum. So for a student with interest in IP, there are lots and lots of IP courses. For someone interested in arbitration, lots of them. Cybersecurity and privacy, likewise. So depending on the student's interest, then they can make the decision whether to take these classes or these classes or these classes. In terms of the approach to teaching, one benefit of having a very international faculty, and I don't mean they teach international, I mean they are international. They are from India and Mexico and China and Singapore and so on and so forth. Spain, other countries I can list. So given that, we have a faculty that is not only open to, but is enthusiastic about having international students in their courses. And so they are distinctly committed to making sure that our students succeed. That's not true, just frankly. That's not true at every law school, right? But here it really is a focus and a priority for us. I think in part given who the faculty is, right? That we recognize the importance of that. So then the breadth of courses is open. In those courses, LLM students here, as opposed to at some other law schools, are integrated with the JD students. So there's a lot of law schools where the LLM students take their own classes by themselves and they don't really interact with the JD students. And I just personally think that's a terrible mistake because it is bad for the LLM students and it's bad for the JD students, right? I've said it now a few times. The practice of law is becoming more and more globalized. And so a valuable thing to get from one's education is exposure to the world, right? Exposure to the breadth of lawyering and legal backgrounds and cultures that are part of legal practice today. So at A&M, at Texas A&M, students are integrated in terms, LLM students, international students are integrated into the coursework. So the basic flow then is, again, arriving in August, there's orientation. We do a special orientation for the LLM students to make sure they're prepared, do some foundational coursework, and then you have flexibility. Then you graduate in May. Bar prep courses start at the end of May. You do those bar prep courses from end of May, for someone sitting for the bar exam, from end of May through about the middle of July. And then the bar exam is at the end of July, for those who sit for the bar exam. And they do that. Students can, apropos, I told you they can choose their courses. In choosing their courses, we do have concentration. So there's an intellectual property concentration, an energy and environmental law concentration, an arbitration concentration, like that. So students can also do those concentrations, but they also can take a range of courses depending on their interests.
Can you tell us something about like the student visa and how to get it? Like, how does that work and how long can people stay back after they are done with if they want to do some internships and they get opportunity? How does those things work?
So the visa process, I don't want to give anything technical because again, it's a technical thing, and I don't want to misstate the thing. But obviously,
just an idea as to what.
Yeah. So, but broadly, obviously, again, students apply for a student visa. They have to document that they are able to financially support themselves, and so on and so forth. And that they are admitted to a program, and so on and the like. We provide support for that. I mean, we help provide the material and facilitate that process. Of course, and so the student then secures their visa and then comes. The biggest thing is the earlier we can start, the better, right? So if a student has been applied and has been accepted and accepts the offer of admission early, that gives us more time, and we know we can make sure the visa stuff is processed. On the back end, there's something called OPT that students are able to stay for a period of time after they finish their studies to do an internship. That's, I think, up to a year. In general, it's up to a year, depending on how you've structured it. That they're able to do that. After that, they can apply for work authorization. That an employer, if an employer wants to keep them on, can apply to have them remain beyond that. But at least for that 1 year, the ability to do an internship and to remain is part of the program. It's called, again, OPT, or Optional Practical Training, it stands for.
If you can tell us a bit about, a lot of questions we have received about a scholarship program. Do you have a scholarship program? What are your fees like, and what's the scholarship program? If you can.
Sure. So because we are a public university, already our base tuition is lower than many other schools. And even private schools, generally tuition is highest. And even among public schools, there are some public schools that are much more expensive than other ones. We are in the much less expensive category. So our base tuition, our starting tuition, is fairly low to begin with. But then again, as I mentioned at the very beginning of our conversation, Texas A&M's perspective is we want good students. And so as a result, we want to do everything we can to make it financially viable for a student to be able to come. So again, and good student means they have good grades. They've done well academically. They have an interesting background. Their language skills are good, so that they will be able to succeed in the classroom. So for those students, absolutely, we have a scholarship program. There are many law schools that basically think of their LLM program as a way to generate money. And so they don't give any scholarships or give $500 or a few dollars. That's not our approach in general. Again, and it's not that there are many students who come for our LM program and our JD program who don't get scholarships. But for good students, with good qualifications, as I mentioned, those students, we have a scholarship program that we consider people for, and that we extend in order to try and make it as viable as possible for students to be able to come to A&M to get their education with us.
Is there any chance you could tell us, in terms of money, what's the quantum of the scholarships? And
so again, go ahead, finish.
And what is the basis you select the scholar? How do you select people for scholarship? Yeah.
Good. So two things. So first, in terms of the process, the second part of your question. So everyone gets considered. Everyone who applies and gets admitted, we consider them for scholarship. So it's not a student doesn't have to petition or something. If a student is a strong student that whatever is well qualified, we will give as much scholarship as we are able to give to them. In terms of the quantum, the hard thing is it varies very widely. So there are students who
examples from the past, perhaps.
Again, no, I'll give you. But again, there are students who come and, given their background and whatever else it is, don't get any scholarship. And then we have students who get 50% or sometimes even more scholarship to come. So we have students who are here who are paying very, very little. In part because given their background, given the university they came from, given their performance, given their language skills, given something interesting, the fit with what they want to do and our curriculum or what we do, we wanted that student to be here. And so as a result, we made it very financially lucrative for them. But again, probably scholarships, the most students, sort of their scholarships are something in the range of 20% to 50%, probably is most of the range. And that is partially a function of the fact that we are not focused so much on the scholarship amount, we're focused on the net cost. So
Right.
compared to, and again, I don't want to name particular schools, but compared to school X or Y in California, if you count both a much higher tuition, but also much higher cost of living, the idea is that A&M, we want A&M to be a attractive option for them, in terms of lower cost of living and the lower tuition that we start with.
Can you give us some ideas as to cost of living in Texas? Like, if generally, like, what could it be for a student? And I understand it's very subjective because it'll completely
Sure.
vary for people.
Well,
So whether people would have any right to do any kind of work while they're there.
Sure. So I want to be careful because I told you the OPT thing. There's also something called CPT, curricular practical training that students can do while they're in the midst of their studies. And I believe it's the case that some of that can be paid employment. I'm not 100% sure though, so I don't want to promise that. So in terms of cost of living, there's lots of, probably the biggest recommendation I would make is there are, if you type into any search engine, cost of living calculators, you can compare cities in the US very easily. So what I can tell you is that cost of living in Dallas-Fort Worth compared to any city in California or any city in New York is about half the cost, right? So an apartment or a room, let's say an apartment, that would cost $1,500 in New York costs $750 or maybe even $500 here in Dallas-Fort Worth. And that's obviously the biggest cost of living is your home, is residence. So that number is much, much less than the states where, again, New York and California, since you mentioned those, compared to New York and California, housing costs are about half or less what the housing cost is there. That's particularly true. So I'm talking about Dallas-Fort Worth. The law school is actually in Fort Worth, although we're only about half an hour, 35 minutes from Dallas. So in Fort Worth, cost of living is even lower than it is in Dallas. So even relative to the Dallas-Fort Worth numbers, we're actually even a little bit less than those. So students are paying, my guess is, depending on their living arrangement, anything from $400, $300 to $400 for a room that they're in an apartment that they're sharing with other people, to $750 maybe, or $700 to $800 for their own studio apartment or a single bedroom. But of course, are there students who pay $3,000 a month? There are, but they're spending too much money. And then all the other costs are quite low. So food costs and all of those costs are actually also quite low here as well.
Great. If you could, we have got lots of questions and we'll start taking them. But before that, one question that everybody would have is that in India, people decide whether to go to a law school or not based on what we call campusing, which basically means whether you have campus recruitment. Is there, like, do they get recruited from campus? I'm not sure if that's how it works in Texas.
What do you mean? What do you mean? Do they get recruited from campus?
So what happens in India is that in law schools, we have companies visiting and conducting interviews. So does that happen there as well?
Wait, you mean, so this is for jobs after graduation or
Yes.
for coming to the school?
No, for graduation.
For graduation. Yeah. No, exactly. Of course we do. Yeah. So we have what we call it on-campus interviews, OCI. So we have on-campus interviews at lots of law firms, government agencies, public interest organizations, law firms and companies. I should separate out that do on-campus interviews with us. Now, lots of students also find their jobs by directly because they know they have an interest in X, Y, or Z, and so they directly reach out to the companies to make those connections. But also we have on-campus interviews.
Okay. All right. So so I would jump into the questions because we have lots and lots of questions from all our attendees. So one question we have received is, what is the teaching style followed by faculty? I think that's an interesting question.
So again, I think it'd be probably, most law schools in the U.S. use some degree of Socratic method, right? So lecture classes where the professor is lecturing, but also calling on students and asking for them to respond and engage back and forth. I have the sense that sort of our faculty, compared to the fact of many schools, it's what I'll call a kinder, gentler version of that. So the model is to engage with the students and work with the students to try and help the students understand the material, as opposed to I'm testing you or quizzing you or so on and so forth. But yeah, broadly, the professors use some version of Socratic method, which again is a lecture, but also including back and forth dialogue with individual students during the class.
Okay. Is there any like practical training sort of that is given?
Sure, lots of it. So we have one of the largest number of clinics, given the size of our student body. We have 10 clinics, 10 student clinics that we do. We also have externship programs that students, as part of their coursework, they can go and spend 10 hours or 20 hours a week working at a company or at a law firm, or at a government agency or whatever, doing legal work. And then we have classes that are what we call simulation classes. So the idea is that you sit in the class and the class is structured as if you were a lawyer, right? So you are simulating being a lawyer and you learn in that way. So there's a very strong focus. And I told you that in some ways is a function of Texas A&M's approach and Texas A&M's mindset in general.
Excellent. Okay, if you can, there's a question on, are there any opportunities for Indian law graduates to teach as a law professor in the US? That's an interesting question.
Well, again, so I would say again, so one of my colleagues, the Sri Raghavan is Indian born and Indian educated. And then came to the U.S., studied in the U.S. as well, got a law degree in the U.S., and then ultimately became a faculty member and is now a faculty member here at Texas A&M. She's not the only one. There are, of course, other Indian faculty in the U.S. So for sure, there are opportunities. What I would tell you is that it's a little bit of, it depends what kind of teaching you want to do. If you want to do doctrinal teaching, then the important task is to publish, to write articles. If you want to do skills teaching, it's to get good legal practice, and then you find opportunities that way.
Okay. There's a question. Okay, there's a question. What's the procedure to do a master's program at Texas University Law School? Are there any fellowships for international students, particularly for Indians? Are there any fellowships?
So I take it to me again, we might want to get clarity. But if fellowships, you mean scholarships? Yes. Is that what you think?
No,
fellowship means?
Fellowships are a little different. Fellowships are like, there are structured fellowship programs. If it is not there, I guess.
So at the law school, there's not again, we have structured programs in the sense of we are building relationships with particular law schools in India where we are talking about students coming from that law school to A&M Law School as part of that program. So you could call that a fellowship, but that's really that's probably the main thing that we have that would be of that sort.
Okay. We have a question. Yeah, there's another question we have is about, are there any plans for starting semester exchange programs with Indian law schools? And you said that you have that, so that's excellent.
Well, we're starting those conversations to figure out what would be the structure. Though I will say to any students participating, we would welcome your input about what that might look like and what would be most interesting and engaging. So feel free to email us about any ideas you have in that regard.
Sure, great. There's a question on what is the scope of tax litigation, both direct and indirect taxes globally and in the US?
You mean in terms of the curriculum?
No, I think he's asking for career advice on tax litigation if you want to.
Sure.
Globally and in the US.
So I would defer to, again, I have my colleague, William Burns, the BYRNES, is sort of as a transfer tax, probably the top transfer tax expert in the United States. And he runs a program, international tax program here at the law school, in that regard. we actually have a very strong tax faculty in general. So I think there's lots of opportunity there. And again, go back to our conversation about the amount of international trade just between Texas and India. So as that grows, the tax issues, international tax issues, are going to be huge. And so I think that's going to be a huge growth area, is my guess.
Okay, there's a question. This one, it says, are there any Magic Circle firms in Texas? How's the placement? So Magic Circle firms are in London, and I think, okay, well, you can answer. Or the big firms?
I think a couple of the Magic Circle firms may have offices in either Houston or Dallas, I think, but I'm not sure. We'd have to look at that. But what I would tell you is that almost every big firm, U.S. firm, now has an office in at least one of the cities in Texas, if not more than one. So no, there's a huge amount of opportunity in terms of big firm, and growing. By far the fastest growing. I gave the example of one big firm, Kirkland & Ellis in New York, opened an office in Dallas that was meant to be a small office. So they opened it with, I think, 6 lawyers 1 year ago. After 1 year, they already have 50 lawyers now. So in 1 year, they went from 6 to 50. And they're still growing.
Right. Okay. What are the requirements for applying to the universities in USA? I mean, this is a more general question, but maybe.
So the main thing I'd say is, again, it's obviously doing well in school, and then taking TOEFL or whatever, taking an English language test to confirm that your language skills. We have some flexibility, I think, to potentially waive that. But some schools don't, and even that can take time. So for students who are able to take it, to take one of the IELTS or the TOEFL is a second piece, and then it's to apply. And that's it.
Okay. If you can throw some light on any social activities that they have done, or
Sure.
articles they have written, what would be like to make their CV more special?
Sure. So in general, we're looking for students who have good experience and are interesting people to have in the community, both because of while they're here, we want that to be true, but also because after they graduate, we want the graduates of the law school to be out in the world doing interesting things, right? So I would say, no, that kind of stuff is hugely interesting. So if someone has some interesting work experience, that's interesting. If someone has been involved in interesting activities, anything from musical instrument they play, to sports activities, to clubs they're a member of, this kind of thing, to things they've written, as you said, obviously that would be hugely interesting. Because again, in general, we are trying to build a good community of interesting people as much as anything else.
Excellent. So, what is the scope of traditional fields of law like civil and criminal litigation in Texas? Barun and Vanu has asked this question.
Sure. Huge. I mean, again, if you remember, so Texas is the second biggest state in the United States. Again, as you mentioned earlier, has four of the 10 biggest cities in the United States. So huge amount of that. So civil litigation, criminal litigation, family law litigation, all of those are everywhere. And there's huge amounts of it. And again, it's growing because of the growth in population, right? Because of the fast growth rate in population, the need for lawyers to do basic civil litigation, basic criminal litigation, family law litigation, and the like is growing very rapidly. So lots and lots of opportunities of that sort. So when I talk about intellectual property and energy law and arbitration and so on and so forth, cybersecurity, these are specialized areas in which a student might practice, but the foundational areas are very strong as well.
In case, I'm just curious about this. Given that if an Indian lawyer starts practicing in civil law or criminal law in the US, wouldn't they find it a little challenging given that they're not familiar with the cultural context and so on?
No.
Have you seen people succeeding in criminal?
Of course, oh, for sure. For sure. No, quite lots. I mean, again, remember, the United States is a country of immigrants. And so my parents, I would cite as an example. So I don't think that's a huge barrier. The language barrier is more, right? I would say, but for most Indian students, they will speak English better than most Americans. So beyond the language barrier, I wouldn't think of that as a thing. It's a little bit of probably it's the case that an international student who wants to practice not IP or something like this, but wants to practice basic criminal law has to do more work to lay the foundation. But once they've laid the foundation, remember again, in a very diverse and multinational and immigrant-filled country, there are probably in every city in the United States there are probably hundreds and hundreds of Indian lawyers practicing criminal law and civil law and family law and so on and so forth.
Okay, that's quite exciting. So we have another question on what is the selection criteria for LLM courses for an Indian? Like I think Banu is asking how to select the right courses while doing an LLM.
Oh, when you're here? So again, it depends. If you're sitting for the bar exam, again, it's more constrained because you have certain requirements you have to fill. If you're not sitting for the bar exam, then instead it's a broader analysis of what courses will situate you for professional success in the U.S., in India, or otherwise, or both. So that's where again it would come down to for a student interested in specializing in a certain area, we want to make sure that they have the courses available for them to do that, and those specializing in another area would do those instead. So that's how I would think about that.
Okay. There's a question about from Shuha on RA and TA. Like, is there any research assistantship or teaching assistantship one could secure in the university as a student?
There are some. So the main university is not in Dallas Fort Worth. It's in College Station, some distance away from us. So the TA and any kind of that kind of work would have to be at the law school. And we do some of it. There are professors who have teaching assistants, and of course, lots of professors who have research assistants. And so there are opportunities like that for students to be able to do those.
Will that be accessible to Indian students given visa restrictions and all of that?
That's what I remember we had talked about earlier. So they're able to do it. I don't know. The only question is, I know they can do it for credit. Can they do it for compensation? They would do it under something. If they do it for compensation, or if they do it outside, I think it's called, Yeah, I think outside work, you can do under the auspices of this, what's called curricular practical training. And it has to be connected to your coursework. And then I believe you can be paid, but I'm not sure. That's the one thing I told you earlier. Mm-hmm. Internal to the law school, you're able to do that.
Right, okay.
It can be paid.
So there's a question in India, we have strict marking scheme, which leaves us with lower CGPA, which on converting to the 4 GPA goes below the desired GPA by US universities. What can be done about it? So somebody's asking a question saying
No, I understand it. Yeah, so here's what I would say is that we are, even compared to other law schools. So remember, here, any question about the legal education that a student has received in India is going to be looked at by a law professor at our law school who was trained in India, right? At an Indian law school and taught at an Indian law school. So as a result, there is, it's not an issue. Our ability to convert and to be able to basically understand what the grades a student has received into an analysis of, is this student well qualified for admission, is very high. So I wouldn't worry about that. You should do your best within the Indian system, and then we'll convert it properly.
Great. So we have a question on, do we need a 4-year degree to do LLM for Texas University? Why 4-year degree? You can do a 3-year degree is also fine, right? If a 3-year.
Yeah, so you have, go ahead. So you have to again, to earn your LLM, you must have completed, because it's a master's degree, you must have completed your undergraduate study. That's the requirement. So it's not keyed to number of years.
Right. So if you have a LLB degree in India, no matter whether 3-year or 5-year, you can apply.
That doesn't matter.
Okay. Great. There's a question on if you have any statistical data showing number of LLM applicant H-1B visas being approved, also considering the chances among other professionals. I mean, I think Mitali is asking do you know if LLM applicants are getting H-1B visas like after doing LLM, I believe?
So our numbers are still weird because I told you, remember, the law school is still fairly new. So our numbers are still too small. So I'm sure some have, but the numbers either way, it's a handful that we would know. So I don't know that I have good data about our law school in particular. As to law schools in general, there are students who are getting them. I don't know that anybody has compiled the numbers to be able to say what percentage. Here's what I would say about that. I would be nervous about. So remember, the system is that the student can spend a year after they graduate doing this OPT, optional practical training. I would be nervous about a student who applies or sort of who comes to the U.S. for an LLM with I must remain in the United States, right? Because again, there is enough uncertainty about the job market and who will sponsor and this kind of thing that I would be nervous about a student assuming that I'm doing this because I know that I will be able to remain for the longer term. Again, are there students who do successfully do so? There are. In fact, there are lots. But I wouldn't want a student to assume that, is what I would say.
Right. So, okay. So there's a question on, does the name of the college from where one does his or her graduation matters at the time of admission in your university? Kritika is asking.
Sure. I mean, in the sense of, again, not the name of it, but the quality of it. So again, just as with all of our admissions, we are looking for strong students. And obviously, a student who has done well at a stronger program is going to be attractive relative to one who is not. But to be clear, if somebody has studied a difficult subject at a less prestigious school and has done well, and somebody has gone to a more prestigious school but done just okay, I'm going to pick the one who went through the more difficult course of study, right? So we are trying to evaluate, will a student succeed and how will they do at the law school? We're not judging you're a fancy person or you're not a fancy person. We don't care about that, obviously.
If somebody did not go to a fancy law school, but they do other things to showcase on their
of course
curriculum like this, they have done other things to compensate for that. I think that should be fine, right?
For sure. Again, maybe more than compensate, right? In other words, because again, given what we're looking for students who will succeed and who will both during school and afterwards. And so for that purpose, that student would be very attractive to us.
How do you consider work experience for this?
Very much. And look, that's true with our JDs too. The general work experience is highly correlated with a student's success in their academic studies. Now, the only caveat is there is some data that says that after 5 or 10 years of being out of school, it can sometimes be hard to again reintegrate at that point. But for 1, 2, 3, 4 years, whatever of experience, for sure, it's a positive.
Okay. We have seen a few questions are already answered, so I'm not going to ask them again.
That's fine.
Okay. What's your university's prospects in space law in the future? Somebody is interested in space law. Keshav.
It's a good question because Fort Worth has Lockheed Martin here, yes, as well as Bell Helicopters and others who are sort of in the aerospace field. And so we've talked about it some. And obviously we do lots of intellectual property. We do lots of cybersecurity and so on and so forth that relate to it. I don't know that there's no current plan to sort of build in space law in particular. But there are lots of opportunities, I would say, that are potentially relevant to that.
I think Texas has the biggest aeronautics hub in the space hub in the US in terms
Where?
In Texas.
Texas, yeah. Yes, because of Houston, and then also again Fort Worth, oddly enough, has a lot of it too. That's right.
Great. So there's a question on any cross-border investment law course available at your university.
Yes. Yeah. So so there's cross-border investment courses, international commercial arbitration courses, international tax, all of those we offer.
Okay. I mean, there are some questions of repetition. I'm not repeating them. We have already answered. How can I connect with you? Could you please share your LinkedIn profile? Okay, I will share
Sure.
the LinkedIn profile.
Yeah,
Maybe.
you share it. You can share it. Yeah, it's available.
Share before I wrap up this session. We are actually already like we are running late, but we are still. There's so many questions. If that is okay with you, Robert, can I ask the rest of the questions, or we can also wrap up if you'd like? Because you're
Sure,
already.
no, we can let's try to do them quick. If there's other ones, we can do them. But of
Yeah,
course, again, as you said with
there
the
are like
LinkedIn,
10 more
anyone can
questions.
reach out to me.
Yeah, there are 10 more questions. So I'm going to share, the LinkedIn profile, and you may send your questions over there as
Please
well.
do. Yeah.
Let's try and answer a few more. Okay, this is done. Priyesh is asking, is there any online platform where you can teach courses for foreign students like us?
Yes. So we're developing a set of both individual courses, certificates, and degree programs. We offer lots of online programs already. So there are ones that already exist. In international tax, in risk management, in wealth management already exist. And we're building some additional ones. So for students who are not interested to be in residence, there are lots of options that we are developing as well. And some of those are general, available to everyone in the world. But there's some that we're developing specifically with India as well, I should say.
Great. So that's your answer, Priyesh. Then Amish is asking, how does your university assist with preparation for the Texas bar exam?
So we have a set of courses that we offer that are sort of courses that are designed to help you be ready for the bar exam. Though again, I will say most students then after graduation also sign up for and do an outside bar preparation course with either Barbary or with Themis or other companies. So anyone who's going to sit for the bar exam, whether a JD or an LLM or anything, should take those classes. But we, in addition, have some internal classes that students do as well.
Okay. So there's a question on sports law, if there's any sports law exposure in Texas.
Well, Texas is probably one of the biggest sports states in the United States, in terms of the state as a whole. And so we do some curriculum related to sports law. It's not a big program. Like we don't have, again, like an intellectual property, but we do some coursework related to sports law.
We have another question on what impact will age have on the admission criteria?
Nothing, none.
None at all. Okay. And what is the impact of age on the bar exam? Can I take the bar exam no matter what my age is?
Regardless, not at all. No, yes, of course you can. No, there's no, in fact, it's illegal. It would be illegal if it did.
Right. Okay. What Texas law firm consider, like what do Texas law firms consider while selecting their associates?
They look at again, grades obviously is a big part of it. They look at experiences, like work experience that folks have. They look at particular class choices. Have they taken relevant classes? The classes that are relevant to the particular work that the student might be hired for. Those are probably the main things.
Okay, great. So I think we are, I mean, this was a very popular session given how many questions we continue to receive. They're like questions.
That's okay.
Yeah.
That's fine. Again, and people should feel free to reach out. Don't hesitate to reach out again with other questions. I'm glad to respond to.
So there's one interesting question. I'm going to wrap up with this. There's a question on how do you see the Indian legal industry?
Good. I think it's incredibly interesting. And I say again, my exposure to it goes back to when I was a little kid. Believe it or not, I knew we had friends of the family of my parents who were lawyers in India. And so got to know it dating back to when I was a 10-year-old kid. And I've always been incredibly impressed by the thoughtfulness, the diligence, all the qualities of mind that I've seen in the Indian attorneys that I've interacted with. And so I know whether here in the US or when I'm in India, it's always incredibly stimulating to engage with Indian trained lawyers, just given the quality of the education. When I've taught in India as well, I should say, the quality of the students, the quality of mind, all of those things have always been incredibly impressive to me.
Okay, thank you so much. There are so many questions pouring in, but I'm not going to take them. You can directly address them to sir, go ahead and ask him directly on LinkedIn.
Of course.
We're sharing the LinkedIn. Before I go, I'm going to share the LinkedIn profile with all of you. Before that, although before we go, we'd also love to know from you, how was the session for you? And I always do this before you just share with us your feedback in a few sentences, so that we know what worked for you, what didn't work for you, and definitely give us a rating out of 0 to 10. 10 for amazing and 0 for not that great. So please share your rating. And so many of you have attended patiently till the end. Thank you so much for that. And thank you, sir, for joining us. And we hope to get get you with us again sometime later. And you
I
are
would love to.
Delhi, and that's a great thing. Anybody here who attended this session and want to attend the session in Delhi, do reach out to me. We have only a few seats left, but would be happy to accommodate as many of you as I can. Please do reach out if you can attend the daily session. Okay, and you can then meet sir in person as well, and there will be also Srividya Raghavan present, who's also a senior professor at the law school at Texas A&M University. So any final words, sir? How was your experience? How did you like this interaction? And
Wonderful. I appreciate. I'm thankful to you. Thankful to LawSikho for hosting this and organizing it. And obviously, thank you to the students for their participation and for all the great questions. And please don't hesitate. If you can come to the session in Delhi, wonderful. But likewise, please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I'm glad to answer whatever questions I can.
All right. Thank you so much. So,
thank you, friends.
Yeah, everybody has given us 10 on 10. But anyway, definitely anybody has any suggestions or feedback or anything we can improve, do reach out to me. Before I go, I'm just going to quickly share the LinkedIn profile.
Okay, and I'll wish you well. Thank you.
Thank you. You can sign off, sir. I'll just share with them the details and also my phone number so that they can reach out to me.
Please do. Yeah. Give them the information. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Bye. Have a great day.